let's talk about Wyrd Sisters by Terry Pratchett. This was the sixth Discworld book, 1988. It was published, I think I read it in about 1999 or so, thereabouts anyway. So this is a reread. I've recently read this and greatly enjoyed it. It's it's a witches novel. It's the second witches novel after Equal Rights, which I have reviewed on this channel. This is the blurb. Witches are not by nature gregarious, and they certainly don't have leaders. Granny Weatherwax was the most highly regarded of the leaders they didn't have. But even she found that meddling in royal politics was a lot more difficult than certain playwrights would have you believe. So a classic Discworld combination of things, particularly as the series gets going, is because they're comedy fantasies, but that from the third book onwards particularly often have or always have a serious kernel and heart to them. You know, the character is serious, the characters have serious stakes, the issues that are being discussed are serious. I think I said the first Discworld book I reviewed on the channel, I think, was Guards, and I think what I said for that was that, you know, this was more, you know, there was philosophy here, and Wyrd Sisters is no exception, certainly. In fact, in some ways, without having reread Sorcery, which comes before Wyrd Sisters after Mort. So I've reviewed Mort on the channel, reviewed Equal Rights, but I haven't reviewed Sorcery. But this is then the next one after that, and I think this feels like this is where it really gets going as a series. Equal Rights, which introduces the character of Granny Weatherwax, it feels like a dry run in some ways. There's things still being developed. Mort is very good, but is just a step off. But here, and then Guards, which is number 8, which I have done a reread on, really feel like all guns blazing. And there's Pratchett ends up with a very long peak. There's 40 adult Discworld books plus the YA. Is it that way round, or is it inclusive? Anyway, you know, 40 or over 40 Discworld books, and really up until the last couple, his abilities are unmarred. I think with the main adult series, I ended up thinking the last one was a bit weak, and the penultimate one was limited but still very fun. But more or less, you're saying, yeah, up until the last couple, affected by his health issues, for therefore over 20 years, he's writing straight classics. What's great about this, and it is a great book, I mean, it's an easy, in my system at least, it's an easy 5-star. Well, you have this thing where Pratchett picks up, this is what I was saying, wasn't I? He picks a fantasy trope, here it's ghosts and royal intrigues and witches, you know, and then he combines it with some other sort of often slightly more real world in some cases, or at least more accessible sort of trope or idea. So here it is that there are theatre people. I mean, there's multiple things that he combines, but that's a big classic thing, is smashing together two concepts like that. And seeing what comes out of it. Guards it's a cop procedural, but also someone summoning a dragon. You know, there's a evil plot to summon dragons to destroy the city, but also it's a police procedural. Here you have these witches, but the witches are really sort of sometimes dangerous or annoying, but essentially benign herb women, medicine women. And the other thing being combined in is the theatre. So it starts with, and continually has as an important element, a theatre troupe, and it's dwarven writer of plays, Will, who is a super inspired Shakespeare type, who basically ends up in this Macbeth-like story with hints of Hamlet, hints of other stories, but particularly Macbeth ends up kind of, these theatre people end up kind of reflecting the action back to the story itself. Because the king of Lanka, this wet and mountainous country kingdom has been assassinated by his cousin, Duke Felmet. This is at the very start. And things start to go wrong from there. The witches get dragged in. There's issues of the true king needing to come back, or at least some people wanting him to, you know, as in the heir to the true king, of Felmet and Lady Felmet as antagonists. And there's so many things that are strong. It's very funny. Pratchett's a very funny writer. There's it's easy to just read a gag out in isolation, and there's funny gags. Every page there's funny gags, but in some ways there's an accumulative effect, I think, of just the continual and consistent humour. And the way the characters are set up in the situation is always funny. But it's not just played for laughs. You have these set-up characters, like there's the professional fool who therefore has no humour and hates the Fool's Guild in Ankh-Morpork, which is so miserable a background and completely unfunny a background, who is caught up between getting to know the youngest of the witches, Magrat Garlic, and trying to be a loyal and diligent fool to his master, who's now Felmet, who is crazy and has killed the king. You have an inversion of the Macbeth trope, with Lady Felmet being the more determined, vigorous one, and Duke Felmet, being the one who from the off is constantly obsessed about blood on his hands. And this actually ends up being a way that Pratchett, these are, I think, some of the best antagonists, actually, in a very simple way, some of the best antagonists in a Discworld book. But they end up being quite affecting and interesting and sympathetic. Sympathetic's the wrong word, actually, but something like that. They are human characters. They're not simply demonic. They are both characters that you connect with. So, there's a lot of character stuff in general is good. Granny Weatherwax, who we've met before, she is fully formed here. Equal rights, there's a sense, though Granny develops over the books she's in, the character development is a thing in Pratchett. It's not a massive thing, but it is a thing. In Equal Rights, there's a sense that Granny is a draft character. She's very funny, she's very effective. Lots of good stuff happens in that book. But here, she feels like the character who will continue through all the appearances she has. You know, it's a bit like pre-colorization Tintin and post-colorization Tintin, or Tracy Ullman, Homer Simpson versus Fox 20th century Homer Simpson. You get the idea, this sense of sketch versus completed thing, or first version versus the famous version. Fun Josh Kirby cover on my copy, which my son was really interested in. It's maybe a shame. I'm not sure I prefer the Kirby covers, but they are so iconic as Discworld things that it's almost a shame that they're not still the main printing. And certainly, separately, it's a shame that Kirby died, and so we don't have a full set of Kirby covers anyway. Though, as I imply, I probably prefer at his best Paul Kidby's covers. The issues and discussions are very subtle, and actually not surprising completely. And I think Pratchett was a big influence on me, and so I'm not surprised by his thoughts as they come up necessarily. But as he talks about monarchy and rule and reign and the king's connection with the land and things like that, you're talking about stuff which is not what you're expecting from a British left-wing humorist in the late 80s. It's multi-dimensional. It's got lots of angles, different perspectives, quite complex perspectives actually on how these things might work. And he's using the speculative side, either the magic, the witches, the blah blah blah, the ghosts, and the magic of theatre as well, to reflect that and to discuss that. And that's what sci-fi fantasy is basically always about at its best. You can enjoy sci-fi fantasy when it's just people hacking dragons to death or whatever, but really great SFF uses ideas to talk about issues and characters and plots, and vice versa, uses characters, plots and issues to examine ideas. And here those various fantasy elements, both tropes and fresh spins on tropes, are used to kind of engage the ideas that Pratchett has. So yeah, it's an easy recommendation. I think it's fine to start here rather than Equal Rights for the Witches. It is a better novel. However, we're talking about books that are 300, 350 pages long. If you've got any, and they're quite, I'm talking about pages with fairly low word count and very easy writing. I'd start with Equal Rights. However, yeah, starting here is no bad thing. I am planning to read Witches Abroad this year as well as the second Guards book, Men at Arms. Just very quickly looking in the published before, there are actually 4 Witches novels before the second Guards novel, which is not what you'd have thought about later, I think, because though the Witches is his second biggest series and joint most important really with the Guards for most people, the Guards really becomes, I think, his home in the Discworld. But yeah, I'm going to read Witches Abroad and Men at Arms this year, and I'm looking forward to Witches Abroad, as I remember that very fondly. There was by the way, an animation of this back in the 90s, which was the first Discworld animations, and which I remember very fondly. I got the DVD and I want to rewatch it. But yeah, so yeah, strong recommend. Not my favourite Discworld novel, but very, very good. If you've read it, tell me what you think in the comments. Recommend your other favourite Discworld books and sub-series. And I will see you next time.